Welcome to Africa's Forgotten Wars, a journey into some of the most underreported conflicts shaping the continent today. In this video, we'll delve into regions where war and unrest are a part of daily life, affecting millions of people. These stories may not make global headlines, but their impact is real and profound. We'll explore the complex histories, the ongoing struggles, and the urgent need for international attention and action. Join us as we uncover the realities of these conflicts, shedding light on the human cost and the fight for peace in some of the world's most troubled areas. Ethiopia, a fragile peace. Ethiopia, a country with a rich history and diverse culture, is navigating a fragile peace after years of devastating conflict. The war in Tigray, which erupted in November 2020, has officially ended with a peace agreement signed in late 2022. However, the nation remains a powder keg, with ethnic tensions and political instability threatening to reignite violence. Ethiopia's troubles are rooted in its complex ethnic composition and a history of centralized power struggles. The Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, dominated Ethiopian politics for nearly 3 decades, until Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed came to power in 2018, promising reforms and greater inclusivity. However, tensions between the federal government and the TPLF escalated, culminating in a brutal war. The war in Tigray was marked by horrific violence, including massacres, sexual violence, and widespread destruction. Both the Ethiopian National Defense Force, ENDF, and the TPLF have been accused of atrocities. The conflict caused massive displacement and a humanitarian crisis, with millions in need of aid. Although the peace agreement has brought some stability, the humanitarian situation remains dire. Over 5 million people are still in need of assistance, and many areas are inaccessible to aid organizations. The conflict has destroyed infrastructure, disrupted livelihoods, and left a generation traumatized. Ethiopia's economy, once one of the fastest growing in Africa, has taken a severe hit. The conflict has disrupted agriculture, the backbone of the economy, and deterred investment. Inflation is high, and unemployment is rising. Reconstruction will require substantial resources and international support. The international community has cautiously welcomed the peace agreement, but remains concerned about Ethiopia's future. Sanctions and aid suspensions have been used as leverage to push for peace, but long-term stability requires addressing the root causes of the conflict, including ethnic grievances and political reforms. Ethiopia stands at a crossroads. The peace in Tigray is fragile, and without comprehensive reconciliation and political reform, the country risks sliding back into conflict. The international community must continue to support peace-building efforts and provide humanitarian aid to ensure a stable and prosperous future for Ethiopia. Democratic Republic of the Congo, a land of endless strife. The Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, is one of the most resource-rich countries in the world, yet it remains plagued by conflict and poverty. The eastern regions of the DRC have been embroiled in violence for decades, driven by a mix of ethnic tensions, political instability, and competition for mineral resources. The DRC's conflicts involve a myriad of armed groups, from local militias to foreign rebel factions. The government, despite its efforts, struggles to assert control over these areas. The presence of international peacekeeping forces has done little to quell the violence. The humanitarian situation is dire. Millions are displaced, and many face severe food insecurity and lack of access to basic services. The constant threat of violence hampers humanitarian efforts, leaving many without the aid they desperately need. The exploitation of the DRC's vast mineral wealth, including cobalt and coltan, fuels the conflict. Rebel groups and corrupt officials benefit from illegal mining, perpetuating a cycle of violence and instability. The international demand for these minerals, essential for electronic devices, indirectly contributes to the conflict. Solving the DRC's problems requires a multifaceted approach. It involves addressing the root causes of the conflict, ensuring fair distribution of resources, and strengthening governance. Until these issues are tackled, the DRC will remain a land of endless strife. Mozambique, the hidden insurgency. Mozambique, known for its beautiful coastline and rich natural resources, is now facing a hidden but deadly insurgency in its northern province of Cabo Delgado. The conflict began in 2017 when Islamist militants, locally known as Al-Shabaab, no relation to the Somali group, launched attacks in the region. The insurgents have taken control of significant areas, displacing hundreds of thousands of people. The violence has disrupted local communities and led to a humanitarian crisis, with many lacking access to food, water, and shelter. The government's response has been largely militaristic, involving both Mozambican forces and private military contractors. However, these efforts have been criticized for their heavy-handedness and human rights abuses, which may be fueling the insurgency rather than quelling it. Cabo Delgado's rich deposits of natural gas have attracted international attention and investment. The conflict has significant implications for these projects, potentially destabilizing the region and affecting global energy markets. Companies such as Total Energies have had to suspend their operations due to the ongoing violence, causing economic setbacks for both the local and national economy. The roots of this insurgency are complex, involving a mix of local grievances, economic disenfranchisement, and religious radicalization. Many young men in Cabo Delgado have joined the insurgents due to a lack of economic opportunities and the allure of the promises made by militant leaders. The government's failure to address these underlying issues has only exacerbated the problem. Human rights organizations have documented numerous abuses by both the insurgents and government forces. Civilians are caught in the crossfire, with reports of massacres, beheadings, and other atrocities committed by militants. On the other side, government forces and their allies have been accused of extrajudicial killings, arbitrary detentions, and torture. The international community has started to take notice, with calls for greater humanitarian aid and efforts to address the root causes of the insurgency. However, the response has been slow, and the situation on the ground remains dire. The conflict has not only caused immense human suffering, but also threatens the stability and development of Mozambique as a whole. Addressing the insurgency in Cabo Delgado requires a multifaceted approach. Military action alone will not suffice. There needs to be a concerted effort to improve governance, provide economic opportunities, and address local grievances. International support is crucial in providing both humanitarian aid and in assisting the government in building a more inclusive and stable society. Without these measures, the hidden insurgency in Mozambique is likely to continue, with far-reaching consequences for the region and beyond. Somalia, battling extremism and instability. Somalia, a country with a turbulent history, continues to face significant challenges from extremist groups and political instability. The rise of Al-Shabaab, an Islamist militant group affiliated with Al-Qaeda, has turned Somalia into a battleground. Al-Shabaab controls large parts of southern and central Somalia, imposing strict Sharia law and carrying out deadly attacks against government forces, civilians, and international targets. The group's insurgency has led to a protracted conflict that the Somali government, with international support, struggles to contain. The humanitarian impact is profound. Decades of conflict have left millions displaced, and many face acute food insecurity and limited access to essential services. Drought and famine further exacerbate the situation, leading to a dire need for international assistance. Somalia's government, despite efforts to stabilize the country, remains weak and fragmented. Clan rivalries and political infighting hinder effective governance and development. The presence of international peacekeeping forces, mainly from the African Union Mission in Somalia, AMISOM, provides some stability but is not a long-term solution. Addressing Somalia's challenges requires a comprehensive approach. It involves not only military action against al-Shabaab, but also political reconciliation, economic development, and support for governance structures. Without these measures, Somalia's path to peace and stability remains uncertain. Central African Republic, a perpetual conflict zone. The Central African Republic, CAR, is a country trapped in a cycle of violence and instability. Since gaining independence from France in 1960, CAR has experienced repeated coups, rebellions, and communal conflicts. The current situation is no different, with multiple armed groups vying for control. The Seleka, a coalition of Muslim-majority rebel groups, overthrew the government in 2013, leading to a brutal civil war. In response, the anti-Balaka, predominantly Christian militias, formed to counter the Seleka, resulting in sectarian violence that has devastated communities. Despite several peace agreements, the conflict persists. The government, supported by UN peacekeepers and Russian mercenaries from the Wagner Group, struggles to maintain control over vast swathes of the country. Rebel groups, including remnants of Seleka and anti-Balaka, continue to fight for territory and resources. The humanitarian impact is severe. Over half of the population needs urgent assistance, and many are internally displaced or have fled to neighboring countries. The ongoing violence has disrupted agriculture, leading to food insecurity and malnutrition. The CAR's future remains uncertain. The international community's efforts to stabilize the country are hampered by the complex and entrenched nature of the conflict. Without a comprehensive and inclusive peace process, the cycle of violence is likely to continue. Sudan, the forgotten crisis. In Sudan, the grim reality of war is a harsh and persistent fact of life. This conflict, often overshadowed by global politics, involves a brutal struggle between the Sudanese Armed Forces, SAF, and the Rapid Support Forces, RSF. It's a power struggle that erupted dramatically in April 2023, leading to a humanitarian catastrophe. The conflict has displaced millions, creating the largest displacement crisis in the world today. The roots of this conflict lie deep in Sudan's history of political instability and military coups. The latest upheaval came when the RSF, a paramilitary group led by General Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, clashed with the SAF, headed by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. The violence quickly spiraled out of control, with both sides committing widespread atrocities. The impact on civilians has been devastating. Entire neighborhoods in Khartoum and other major cities have been reduced to rubble. Basic services like water, electricity, and medical care are scarce. The UN has warned that this conflict could trigger the world's worst hunger crisis, with millions facing starvation and acute food insecurity. Despite international calls for a ceasefire, the fighting shows no signs of abating. The conflict is a grim reminder of the international community's failure to address the root causes of instability in Sudan, leaving millions in dire need and on the brink of a humanitarian disaster. These conflicts paint a grim picture of Africa, driven by historical, political, and socio-economic factors. Beyond military interventions, strategies promoting governance, development, and social cohesion are crucial. Urgent humanitarian aid is needed. The world cannot ignore these crises, as their impacts extend far beyond Africa. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.